Why should we also learn our weaknesses? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Jill from the North Woods, going through lessons that will help you take control of your own lives. Today, we're going to talk about why it's important to not just learn our strengths, what we talked about last week, but now learn about our weaknesses. It's a whole different way of looking at our lives and knowing basically which direction we should go. So if you don't know your weaknesses, it can really catch you. It can leap at you from behind as you get caught in something that you're just not very good at. And if you don't name it, you can't fix it. If you don't know what it is, there's no way that you're going to fix whatever it is. And if you don't own your weaknesses, it can make you turn down some wrong paths in life. And so that's why it's important for you to, first of all, examine your patterns. One of the best ways of learning your weaknesses is just to look back and say, oh, yeah, that's always been the thing. I look back in my own life and I know that writing is my weakness. I am just a terrible writer. I would say I used to be a terrible writer. Me in school, I panicked when I had to write something. And it takes me forever. It exhausts me. I don't feel I'm very good at it. And at the end, I'm not very pleased with my results. Ooh. So looking back at your life and looking at where you repeatedly, either unconsciously or consciously, avoid it, panic about it, not do a very good job of it when it comes to grades or something like that, that's one way, probably the best way of identifying it. And why should we look at our weaknesses? The first one is, if you don't know what they are, they can sabotage you. They can leap out from behind and slowly kill like your career or something else. You can't fix it without naming it. You can't pick the right job that avoids your weaknesses, or, like I said, go back and fix your weaknesses so you're better at it. So let me give you an example. I know that I was terrible at writing. I could do almost anything: math, science, I'm very good at that. Computers, I eventually got very good at that. But when I was in grade school, if you asked me to write something, I panicked. I really panicked because it would take me a very long time. I would work at it very hard. I have a hard time editing myself. I learned some tactics later on, thanks to my college roommate and now Bud. She told me to read it out loud. And I went, oh, that's a great idea. And to tell you the truth, you know what I do right now is I have, at times when I've had to write something that's very important, I have recorded it into all my podcast stuff and then listened to it back to see if it sounded okay. So that's part of it. But you just basically can't tackle something if you don't know what it is. Eventually, what I did is I ended up taking a series of writing classes through the university extension and got much better at it. I still don't love it. I still don't volunteer to do it, but I'm much better at it and I'm much less panicked about it. The second reason you want to do that is it helps you grow faster, because now if you can target something, like I targeted my writing. I've always been panicked about my writing, and at work too, that if someone asked me to write something, it would cause dread in me. So I took the classes. And now, because I know what my weaknesses are, I built systems around to support me for my podcast, for my work. I have built ways that I can get through writing with it. And then I can also maybe even set realistic expectations about it. And the other thing is, I don't volunteer for roles or tasks that will just drain me. There were times, I remember, I forgot what it was, at something at work. They say, we need a number of people to write up these manuals and we need someone else to go speak at this conference. And I'm like, I would like to go speak at the conference. And nobody wanted. The fear of speaking in public, I think, is stronger than the fear of death. So I was like, yes, I want to speak in front of everyone. Don't make me write something. But that gave me guardrails of knowing where I could put my energies, where I can put my systems, like I said, in support. Now I have a whole group of systems in support to support me when I do have to write something. It can also, by knowing our weaknesses, it can help build relationships with other people. My best friend and I, we became friends in college. She helped me write when I had to write papers in college. She would show me where I was doing something wrong. She's the one who suggested that I read it out loud so that I could hear it instead of reading it. I think it's like an ADHD thing that when I read my own writing, it like the letters fuzz out. I can read other books and things like that. I read my own writing. I don't pay attention to it. But by her lesson of teaching me to read it out loud, now I suddenly have to focus on it and I got better at it. But the other thing is too is that she had weaknesses of her own. So we built a bond around our mutually different weaknesses. And so it gave a real relationship there. And the other thing is if you know your weaknesses, it will help you to protect your strengths, that you can strike out with your strengths, be more confident in the things you're doing with your strengths if you know how to avoid the weakness pitfalls. So as like I said, if I do a group project, like let's say in grade school, you always got put with those group projects you had to do with people. I could actually focus on my strengths in those group projects and then have the other people on the team who had complementary strengths, they could focus on the things I was weak at. So by knowing my weaknesses, I could actually build relationships with other people and then also protect my own strengths by not falling into a pitfall. The other part of it is that it has a lot to do with having some sort of personal integrity, some emotional honesty with people. When you can say to them, I'm not very good at writing, can you help me with this? Or would you mind checking this over? This is not my forte in life. This is not what I'm good at. Instead of pretending and covering up, like I said, with that coworker who I thought was fantastic and I wanted to be more like her, when I became more me and my strengths and then learned more about my weaknesses, I could just be honest with people and say, are there other aspects of this project I could do? For example, I was the third member of a training team and we needed manuals written, tip sheets written, and a number of other things for a new release. You know what else we needed? Video tutorials of each of the new releases and also a webinar on the new releases. Well, guess who got to do all the talking? Me, because that's what I wanted to do. I was able then to basically, instead of pretending like I didn't have a weakness, I could instead drive into the thing that I'm good at and go right for it. So I volunteered to do the webinars and to do the video training classes because I built around it. Some resilience against your weaknesses. First of all, by accepting you're not very good at it, but then also being able to, like I said, tackle them, take classes, learn them better. Um, the idea is that once I know about it, I can do something about it. And if I don't know anything about it, I can't. So let's say now you're asking yourself, well, what are my weaknesses? I don't really know. Same thing with your strengths. Well, what tasks do you constantly avoid that you try to get around? I always tried to get around writing. You saw a number of places where I asked if I could speak at a conference. I asked if I could do the webinars and do the training videos. What am I trying to avoid and what am I trying to lean into? Right there is a good indication, not only my strengths, but my weaknesses. And at what point do I feel the most failure, the most embarrassment, the thing that I'm trying to hide the most? Boy, right there, that reflection will help you. Next part is asking for feedback. You can ask people for feedback. My friend in college, she always gave me feedback on my papers that I was writing and where I was kind of falling through. I think this was an ADHD thing too. She goes, you always sort of go back and forth between tenses. You're either in past tense and then you talk about present tense. Your subjects don't match your verbs. I think it was an ADHD thing now in reflection, but she was sort of pointing out, she goes, it's kind of weird. She says, you know the rules, you just can't seem to follow them when you're writing. And I was like, yeah, that's true. Then the other people might even say to you, you take on too much, or you're the one who volunteered to write the manuals. Maybe you should back off of doing that. Right. The other part is do some kind of a self inventory. We talked about Strength Finders 2.0. Unfortunately, there's not a Weakness Finder 2.0. Boy, I like that book. But the idea is that you can look at Strength Finders 2.0 and see the things you scored the least on. That's an idea. Or you can also talk about roles you took that didn't work out the way that you hoped that they would. Whenever you're procrastinating, sometimes it's because there's a weakness or an insecurity there. Sometimes it's just because of something else. Last night, I procrastinated by not recording videos and worked on a presentation that I'm doing for a conference in July. Funny way of procrastinating, but that one wasn't to avoid a weakness. That one was to just avoid doing something I was too tired to do at the moment. And I think the other big thing to look at when you're talking about weaknesses is what just drains the energy right out of you. I do these videos and it usually pumps me up. I'm usually energized by them. I'm excited by them. I like this whole process of doing them. But there are things that I do in my life, namely yard work, that drain me more than they should. I hate yard work. I hate weeding with a passion. And when I do those things, I just feel like that whole day was just a waste. It exhausts me. It exhausts my brain, even though my brain is not involved in it. I just hate it. And then, the other idea is comparing what would be the ideal situation versus what actually happens. It would be ideal that I could sit down, quietly sit by myself, write a blog article, write a book, write something that would amaze you all. But I can see that's not what happens. So the idea is that, trying to, instead of looking at it as a failure, I see where I have areas I want to grow in. And then the other thing is to see what emotionally sets you off. If someone looks at your writing or the thing that you're weak at, does it make you squirm? Do you dismiss it? Do you get defensive about it? Sometimes when we have emotional reactions to feedback in a particular area, that's a good indication we have a real weakness there. So then, like I said, comes the question, what do we do about it? And this really is where I think is the most interesting part of it is that you'll see a lot of books, or some books, I say, that will tell you to take your weaknesses and then drive yourself into the ground to get better at them because you want to be a complete person. I'm kind of not of that opinion. Now, let me try to say that there are two baskets that you're going to put your weaknesses in. One, I really need to be at least decently good at. And these, I don't need at all. Okay, so let's take a look at those. I talked about writing. The world expects you to be at least a decent writer in the work world, in the tech world. I have to write tech manuals and tech tips and things all the time that I need to improve on. What are some other things that I'm particularly bad at? Art. I have not one bit of art in me. My brother is an artist. He got all the art genes squooshed into him, and I have not one of them in me. Now, I would love to learn how to draw, particularly for Buzz Blossom and Squeak, and do birding journals and that kind of thing. It's painful to me how bad I am at art. Honestly, I don't need it. I could go my whole life without doing any kind of artistic drawings, paintings. I knit, and that's artistic in a sense. But I could go my whole life and I wouldn't need it. Let's drop it out. So you sort of have to put things in those two buckets of I need to at least do a moderately good job of it, cleaning, right? Even weeding my yard. I have to at least do some kind of job at it, or the city hauls me away for yard laws. The idea is what can I drop completely and what can I lean into getting better? Now, my brother asked a really interesting question because I told him that I was using AI to help write my blog articles from the transcripts. So, what did I do? I took the thing I'm good at, talking, and I record something. I run it through a transcriptor, and then I run it through ChatGPT. Cleans it up into a blog article. So if you look at my podcast show notes, written by ChatGPT, I'm not a writer. But I also don't believe that you're coming to the YouTube channel, you're coming to the podcast to see my writing in the show notes, right? That is not the primary purpose of it. And so he asked this question, well, aren't you ever then going to become a better writer if you just let ChatGPT help you in that? And that's a great question. And the idea, I think, for me is that, first of all, I have gotten better because of Grammarly and ChatGPT because I see how it did something. I remember once I was doing, I think it was like Romans 13 or something like that. And I was struggling to get to my point, with the podcast because it was kind of on a difficult chapter. So I ran what I had through ChatGPT and after the transcript and asked it to summarize my ideas for me. And it did. And I'm like, okay, I see where I was missing it. I was unable to sort of summarize at the end what my thoughts were. I think because I was struggling with the difficulty of the chapter, but it gave me some insight. It gave me insight into what I really thought about it. And so it actually helped me to do the rest of the podcast. Same thing with the show notes and everything else. I have learned better grammar from it. I have learned how to sort of turn a sentence. I remember once I was having a difficulty because I had this thing that was way too long that I was trying to write. And I said, could you, to ChatGPT, could you combine this to make this much shorter? And it took 2 pages of documents and turned them into 1 page of documents, which was my goal. And I thought, oh, look, I see what it did here. It kind of grouped it in a different way than I was thinking, and it taught me something. I think I am learning, and it is one way to learn. But the question is that will I get better as a writer if I let things like ChatGPT help me write? And the question is maybe not as much as if I just struggled through it and wrote it myself. I don't know that I'm willing to do that for podcasting right now. I have a full-time job. I have to write for my full-time job, which I can't use ChatGPT. So the question comes in at that particular point, I don't have the time to become a fantastic show notes writer because I have 7 recordings a week. They all have to get edited, put up on the website, put up on YouTube, all those types of things. And so at some point, you're going to have to decide for your own strengths and weaknesses, where do I have to really invest my time and energy? And where can I let some sort of an aid help me? Or, like I said, take a class so that you get better at that thing. That's where you're going to have to decide for yourself at those points about where it is you cut off that line. Maybe someday when I retire, I would love to become a better writer, maybe even write a book, but that's not going to happen today. Anyway, I hope that helps, in defining where your weaknesses are and why it's really important just as much as your strengths. Please remember that you can always email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. I'd love to hear from you. Did I get something right? Did I get something wrong? Did you have a different thought about it or your own ideas? You can also put them in the comments here. I point over here like it's over here. You can put also the comments that are there. If you have something else to say about the topic, I'd love to hear from you. Have a great day.